Welcome to Defense News. I'm Vago Muradian. Improving the Marine Corps' ability to project amphibious power worldwide, and how the Navy is balancing cost and requirements as it develops its new ballistic missile submarine. But first, Defense Secretary Ash Carter went to Silicon Valley to unveil new technology initiatives as the United States seeks to remain ahead of increasingly tech-savvy adversaries. One was a new DoD cyber strategy to deter future attacks by making it clear the United States will use all means at its disposal to respond to future attacks. And Carter called on top tech firms to devote their talent and technology to improve national security. Fast-moving threats demand Silicon Valley's agility, and to bridge the cultural divide, Carter wants a new office in Silicon Valley to facilitate cooperation with a Pentagon that, despite acquisition reforms, remains slow-moving. Carter also launched a mid-career program to attract top cyber professionals to uniform. Here to discuss what Carter's moves mean are Byron Callan, a veteran Wall Street analyst with Capital Alpha Partners, and former Pentagon Industrial Policy Chief Steve Grunman, who's now with the Atlantic Council. Guys, thanks very much for joining us. Steve, I want to start with you. Why do you think Carter's initiatives are so important, and does it really mark a change or a turn in how the Pentagon does business?
It'll remain to be seen whether it marks a change in how the Pentagon does business, but the fact that the Secretary uses an early day, one of the early days in his tenure, to put his personal stamp behind this initiative, to put his personal stamp on that he thinks engaging Silicon Valley is important, I think is quite a big deal, and one that has significance both for its ostensible audience in Silicon Valley, but almost as importantly for the acquisition management system and the people in it who do pay attention to what the leadership cares about.
Byron, we've got about 30 seconds. Talk to us also about one of the key takeaways on a podcast that Ash did about sort of his view on the kind of companies he wants to compete in this space.
Well, I think there was an Andreessen Horowitz podcast that was done the day after. Andreessen Horowitz is a venture capital company that Secretary Carter visited. I think it was a very clear and important recognition that you can't address this technology access issue by having large heritage defense companies buy small technology startups. They're entirely different cultures, and there's a generational divide, a cultural divide that I think he wants to see these companies deal directly with the department, not through an intermediary.
And not get bought up, but remain independent.
Absolutely.
Guys, thanks very much for joining us. A very important topic. Thank you very much. Coming up, how the Marines will use new ships to project power worldwide. You're watching Defense News.
For years, voices both inside and outside the Pentagon have described the Department of Defense as a place where innovative thought is too often crushed beneath a risk-averse bureaucracy, one which rewards staying the course over disruption.
The incentive structure is not in place to inspire innovation in DoD.
How to change that was a major focus at a May 12th event hosted by the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum, a group of current and former military officers seeking to reform the department from the inside. Attendees interviewed by Defense News agreed there are good ideas floating around the Pentagon, but that the department needs to open itself up to actually listening to them.
I don't think there's a shortage of new ideas. What I think there's a shortage of is a process or mechanisms to take those ideas and figure out the best ones and then try them out and then learn from that. So what we don't have is a learning process, there's a term out there floating around called learning for investment. So we always grade these ideas by what's their current return on investment. And we never look at the idea of, well, what might we learn from these ideas? So there's no mechanism or process to do that. And that's why I think these ideas die. So we have plenty of ideas. We don't have a good way to execute them or to try them out.
One area of discussion focused on how to enable members of the military to leave service and then return later with new skill sets crucial to the future fight.
And historically, the term revolving door has been, a bad word in the Pentagon. I'm concerned that we might need to actually start installing revolving doors, in metaphorically speaking. We might need to start creating mechanisms for people to move from the technology sector into the Pentagon and back more quickly, so that they're bringing in those skills, and within a year, 2 years, when those skills are now all outdated, let's send them back. They can come back in a few years. Let's get someone else in the meantime. So I worry how much our long-term career paths are actually hurting our ability to keep cutting-edge technology knowledge.
Ultimately, changing DoD's culture may require leadership coming to grips with why changes are truly needed.
But I think we need to do a better job of articulating the why and the benefit from that, because I'm not convinced that we've done a good job of telling that story yet. It's a good story, but I don't think we've done a good job telling it yet.
Reporting for Defense News, this is Aaron Mehta.
This week on Defense News, we speak to our Israeli bureau chief about progress in destroying underground passageways from Gaza, and we get a close look at programs out of DARPA to service satellites in space and promote cybersecurity from the battlefield. Welcome to Defense News. I'm July Toro, and here's a look at this week's top headlines. Defense Secretary Ash Carter is rebooting his Silicon Valley outpost. The Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, or DIUX, will now report directly to Carter, sidestepping an internal Pentagon bureaucracy that sources say has been cold, if not outright hostile, to the Silicon Valley group. The Pentagon will also open a new DIUX outpost in Boston and filter more funding to the effort, though the Secretary did not offer specifics in terms of how much. Former Secretary of Defense and longtime U.S. Senator Chuck Hagel warns that unless the next U.S. president makes it a priority to sit down with Russian leader Vladimir Putin, the two nations could find themselves drawn into a Cold War-style buildup. Hagel told reporters that the next U.S. leader needs to swallow their pride and personally sit down with Putin to de-escalate tensions in both Europe and Syria. Germany's Minister of Defense announced the first buildup of military personnel since the Cold War ended 25 years ago. The plan is to expand the force by more than 14,000 and civilian employees by more than 4,000. The increase in troop strength comes amid a new Russian threat in the East and political and military turmoil in North Africa and the Middle East. And now, joining us via Skype to speak about anti-terrorist efforts in Israel is Defense News Israel Bureau Chief Barbara Rome. Barbara, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, hello. My pleasure.
We're so happy to have you here. I wanted to talk to you. You've reported quite a bit about discoveries of cross-border tunnels extending into Israel from southern Gaza. Who built the tunnels?
Well, these tunnels were built by Hamas, the designated terror organization that has been administering the Gaza Strip. And they were built as strategic weapons to be used against Israel. And Jill, it's important to note that these tunnels are not new. Hamas used them very successfully to strategic effect a decade ago when they crossed underneath the border into Israel, raided an Israeli tank, killed one crew member, and took captive an Israeli soldier.
We are going to take a quick break. Stay tuned for more with Barbara Rome, Defense News Bureau Chief in Israel. You're watching Defense News.
We're here in Ashburn, Virginia at the Flags of Valor workshop. Brian, thank you for having us.
Oh, thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit about Flags of Valor.
So Flags of Valor is a veteran-owned, operated combat veteran company, and that gets to make beautiful American wall art. And we get to do that with combat veterans and provide them a therapeutic transition from their service. We get to do that by, we believe Made in America still matters, so we utilize all American suppliers and materials that go into our products. And lastly, but not least importantly, we get to give back to charities and multiple organizations.
We're happy to be here and understand you're going to give me a tour.
Absolutely.
All right, let's check it out.
All right.
Brian, tell us a little bit about how this company got started.
So I used to be in the Army. I was an infantry paratrooper in the 82nd. I spent 3 years doing that, jumping out of planes, and got out, went to college, and 9/11 happened, and I was upset like most Americans and decided I wanted to go back in and joined the Air Force. I became an aviator in Air Force Special Operations. I deployed a bunch of times, and I think it was on my 8th deployment I got injured.
8 deployments. That's a lot of deployments.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of guys that do a lot more, but I think I'd done 8 or 9, and I'd gotten injured, and as I was going through rehab, I didn't wear my flag anymore, my uniform, because I was just wearing normal, attire for rehab, and found a beautiful American flag online for my wall, my house, and unfortunately, it wasn't made in America.
Where was it made?
It was made in China, so again, that upset me, and so the next day I started woodworking in my garage, and found that very therapeutic, and then I started donating some of my flags that I made to service members' families after they had passed, and philanthropically it felt great. It was that feeling I tell everyone you can't buy, and then and then people wanted to, were driving by asking if there was a demand. So I thought, well, why not launch a company? And here we are today. We're in a 6,000 square foot workshop, and this is our wood side where we do all our cutting, and everything's done by hand. We're really old school, no automation. All of our wood's brought in, and it's all cut and routed and sanded. We use all American, made tools and equipment. And so everything's done over here for the wood side, and then we have the wet side over here, which is where we do all of our painting and polyurethane and our sealing.
It looks like there's some painting going on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go check this out. So this is our wet side, we call it. This is where we do all of our painting, staining, as the guys are doing right now. Distressing. All of our flags go through an 8-step antiquing process. We love wood. We want it to look like wood. That's why we use wood. We love the patina of wood. So it goes through the whole process over here. And then at the very end, they're all sealed so you can hang them inside or outside.
And all the guys that are working on these flags, they're veterans, right?
They are. They're not just veterans, but they're also combat veterans. And I do that because, well, I am one. I know it motivates them and drives them. And most veterans, when they get out, they miss that brotherhood and camaraderie. So we get to provide that, therapeutic work environment as they get out and transition out.
When you see these guys working, they're joking around, but they're working hard. I mean, it's almost like a small unit in itself right here.
It is. I mean, we start as a team each day. We end as a team. We create something from a pile of raw materials, just wood at the start of the day, and then we get to create beautiful art by the end of it.
And it's American made.
It's all American made. That's right.
All right. So what's the next step?
So the next step, we'll go out here, and then this is where all of our products we let them cure. So all of our products go through a long curing process. It takes about 48 hours for them to properly cure and seal, and then we'll go on to the next step, which is our packaging section. So after the wet side, all of our flags are cured and racked for 48 hours, and then now we come over to the packaging side. Like I said, we do everything by hand. We want everyone that receives any of our products from our company to feel, handcrafted. They're all craft papered like a gift, and then they each come with a card of why the flag was named, why we named it that, and a personal note signed by one of our craftsmen, and then all of our artwork on the back is signed by our craftsmen.
That's great. So where are these flags going?
All over. I mean, all over the United States, internationally, just wherever our customer demand is.
And it's more than American flags, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We make law enforcement, police, fire flags. We make state flags, and then finally, we do all the service branch flags or anything related to the different services. And there's actually one more flag I want to show you.
Okay.
It's right in here.
All right.
So this is the first flag I ever made.
Wow.
My brother had brought me down a pallet, and I ripped it apart and started painting that day. And
this is an old pallet right here.
It's an old pallet. It's about 30 years old, and that's the first flag I ever made. And then this is the second flag I ever made. My floors got redone down in Florida, so I used all the old wood that I had from the flooring and just flipped it over and started working on it just to perfect my craft. Wow. So that's the second one.
Wow, from humble beginnings, and now you got all this.
That's right.
So what's next for you?
Just continue our mission of what we do as a company, making stuff in America and hiring veterans and promoting patriotism.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for the tour. It was excellent.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Defense News, while reporting from the Royal International Air Tattoo immediately prior to Farnborough, spoke to Lockheed's Executive Vice President and General Manager for the F-35 program, Jeff Babione, about some of the challenges the company faces in these final stages before the F-35 becomes operational. The first question, what's causing delays in Alice, the software that supports planning, maintenance, and sustainment of the jet systems?
Alice is a critical element of flying and operating the F-35. And as we know, we are developing the latest implementation of Alice, known as 202. It has significant capability to the already existing capabilities for Alice. It will give them an opportunity to batch order parts, enable them to deploy in different configurations, all things that we think are improvements for the program.
On the next Defense News, Medal of Honor recipient Flo Groberg on his life after retirement. Military vets and first responders collaborate on disaster relief. And going beyond the skies with unmanned vehicles.